Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. I bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah Ta'ala, the one who has no partner and no similar, the one who has no length and no width and no depth and no perimeter, the one who is not a volume and is not in a place. And how could he be in a place when he existed before time and space? He speaks without sound or letter or language, not Arabic, Hebrew, nor Korean. He's not light. He's not a spirit. He has nothing in common with human beings. He's not in the direction of up, down, right, left, front, nor back. And whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different than that. And I bear witness that our noble and unrivaled master, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the slave of Allah, his final messenger, and the best of all of God's creations. May Allah unite us with him in paradise and grant us a drink from his basin. And as always, I ask Allah to grant me and to grant all of you sincere intentions that we acquire this knowledge for the purpose of benefiting ourselves, benefiting others, and seeking success on the day of judgment. Ameen. We're continuing in the book, the 7 Hadeeth. There's a second edition out. The cover looks like this now, but it's not very different from the green one. We are in the second Hadith in the book, known as Hadith Jibril. In this Hadith, the Angel Jibril alayhi salam says to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, tell me about Islam. And our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam says Islam is to testify that there is no one worthy of worship but Allah, and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and to establish the salat. And all these weeks we've been talking about establishing the salat, because in order to establish the salat, there are conditions that must be met, meaning there are things you must satisfy before you begin the salat. And among those things that you must satisfy are purification. So we talked about the conditions of purification, including water, things you need to know about water being pure and purifying. We talked about minor hadith and how you lift it, which is by wudu. We talked about major hadith and how you lift that, which is by ghusl. Today, inshallah, we're going to talk about tayammum. Tayammum is a special type of purification which you use when you are not able to when you're not able to use water. Okay, if you're not able to use water on your body, meaning that you will not be able to make wudu, or you're not going to be able to make ghusl, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his mercy has given us a way out. He's given us an alternative, which is tayammum. Tayammum is done not with water, but with dust. And this is one of the khasa'is of this ummah, meaning this is one of the special blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to this ummah that was never given to any of the former nations. It wasn't given to any of the nations of the prophets before Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But one of the things that make this nation special is that tayammum exists in our sharia, and it did not exist in any of the sharias before us. It says, going straight into the book, section 3D, tayammum. It says, when one is unable to use water. What does it mean if someone's not able to use water? Okay, it means that, there's several cases. It could be that they simply don't have any water, so that's why they can't use it, because they don't have any. Or it could be that they have water nearby, but they can't get to it. Like if there's a lake over there with plenty of water that you could use for wudu or ghusl, but between you and the lake, there's a pride of lions. So you fear for yourself, or you fear for your health if you were to get that water. Okay. Or for example, you see a lake over there, but between you and that lake is a big giant chasm in the ground that you can't cross. Okay. This counts as water not being available. Or another kind of case would be like if you have water, but the amount of water that you have is just enough to satisfy your thirst and the thirst of any respectable animals you may have with you. So like if you're traveling on camel or on horseback, you have just enough water for yourself and for your horse or your camel. You don't have enough water to also make wudu or also make ghusl. In this case, we would say that water is not available. So you can't use water in wudu and ghusl. You would instead make tayammum. There are also cases where water is available and plenty, like you don't need the water for some other purpose, but because of a sickness or injury that you have, you can't use water. So in this case, it's not that the water is unavailable, it's just that you can't use it. Okay, there are some people who have a skin condition where if water touches their skin becomes like fish scales. Okay, in this case, we say the water is harmful to them, and so they're not required to use it. They can't use the water. There are people who have injuries, cuts, bruises and things of that sort, where because the cut is deep, water can't go into that cut. So when you try to make wudu, for example, you're not going to be able to wash where the cut is. So this is an example of you not being able to use water because it will harm you. In all of these cases, when you can't use water, then we do something called tayammum. It says when one is unable to use water and consequently unable to perform a complete wudu or ghusl. Notice I said a complete wudu or ghusl. Okay, like if a person has an injury on his arm, he's able to perform a wudu. There's just one little part of his arm that he can't wash because water can't, that injury needs to be dry. Okay, so there's just one little part of his body that he can't wash. But nonetheless, because of that one little part that he was not able to wash, his wudu will not be completely valid. There's going to still be some minor hadith on his arm on the place that he did not wash. And because of that minor hadith, he will have to make tayammum. And these are all rules that we can cover in bigger books, inshallah. But when I say you're not able to use water, I don't mean you can't use water at all. I just mean that you're not able to perform a complete wudu. Some part of your wudu is going to have to be left out. Or you're not able to perform a complete ghusl, meaning some part of your ghusl will have to be left out. Maybe the entire ghusl will be left out. But something that should be washed will not be washed. That's what we mean. Or something that should be wiped will not be wiped. It says when one is unable to use water and consequently unable to perform a complete wudu or ghusl, he makes tayammum. Okay, notice tayammum here is an alternative for wudu and an alternative for ghusl. You make tayammum when you can't perform a valid wudu or when you can't perform a valid ghusl. Tayammum is not a substitute for anything else besides wudu and ghusl. It says tayammum must be performed using unmixed, dusty, and purifying soil. Let's talk about those qualifications one at a time. So first it says this soil must be unmixed. What that means is that the soil that you use for tayammum, it must be pure earth. Like it must be the substance that the earth is naturally made out of. Okay? So if that soil was mixed with something that is not natural but man-made, okay, like gypsum, for example, then that soil is not suitable for tayammum. Similarly, if the soil has been mixed with ashes or mixed with cement, this soil is mixed and it's not suitable for tayammum. The next qualification here, it says dusty. So whatever soil you use for tayammum, it needs to be dusty. Why does it need to be dusty? Because the tayammum is actually performed with dust from the soil. It's not performed with the soil itself. Okay, you don't pick up a handful of dirt and start rubbing it on your body. No, as you'll see a little bit later, what you do in tayammum is you smack the ground, and by smacking it, it kicks up dust. It kicks up dust from the ground, and the dust gets on your hand, and you wipe the dust on your body. So if the soil is not dusty, then it's not going to be suitable for tayammum. You need a kind of soil that when you smack it, dust comes up. And the third qualifier here is that this soil must be purifying. Okay, when we say purifying, we mean that you're not using dust that has already been used to perform some type of purification. So, for example, when you make tayammum, if you wipe the dust on your face, any dust that then falls off of your face or dust that falls off of your hand is considered to be used dust. And that dust cannot be used again for another tayammum. But if you have unmixed, dusty, purifying soil, I forgot something else to say. When we say that the soil must be purifying, it means that it's unused. It hasn't been used already. But the soil must also be pure in the sense that it's not contaminated with najasa. Okay, sometimes the soil on the earth may be contaminated with najasa, such as if an animal peed on that soil. So if the soil is contaminated with najas filth, then also that bit of soil is not suitable for tayammum. There's one more word here that I'm going to emphasize a little bit because you may have heard some things out there in the world. People say a lot of things. So just to clarify for everyone, what the Shafi'i ruling is, tayammum must be done with soil. Okay, your tayammum, according to the Shafi'i school, is not valid if it's done using something that's not soil, like rocks. Okay, some people, one time I was traveling, I was at Heathrow Airport in London, and they have a little prayer room set up for people to pray. And right outside the prayer room, they got a big rock sitting on the shelf with a sign instructing Muslims to make tayammum using the rock instead of using water, instead of making wudu. And I'm just sitting there like, who told these people to put that there? Number one, in the Shafi'i school, you can't make tayammum from a rock. It needs to be soil. But even in some of the madhabs that allow you to use a rock, such as the Maliki madhab, it's still a condition that you must be unable to use water before you can make tayammum. And the fact of the matter is, plenty of water is available inside an airport. There's bathrooms all over the place with working sinks. Okay, so the fact that water is readily available is already enough reason to preclude tayammum as a possibility. So you cannot make tayammum, even according to the madhab that says you can use a stone. Okay, no, if water is available and you're able to use it, then you use water. It says, and may not be done until after. So tayammum has a time. Tayammum has a time. Okay, wudu you can do at any time. Ghusl you can do at any time. But tayammum, there are certain things that must be done first before you can do a tayammum. All right, what are the things that must be done prior to you making tayammum? Number one, it says the prayer time has come in. So one of the conditions of tayammum is that whichever obligatory salat you're making tayammum for, the time for that salat has already entered. So you cannot make tayammum in order to pray dhuhr. You cannot make tayammum before dhuhr time. Okay, it's different than wudu. You can make wudu before dhuhr time, and then when dhuhr time comes in, just pray dhuhr. But you cannot make tayammum before dhuhr time and then pray dhuhr with that tayammum. Okay, you cannot do that. Okay, this is why. Why is this? This is because tayammum is a special, it's like a special rule, which is only resorted to due to necessity. Okay, if you find yourself that you have Hadeeth on your body, whether it's minor Hadeeth or major Hadeeth, if you have Hadeeth on your body and you need to make salat and you're not able to use water, that is the situation where Allah gives you this special option of making tayammum. Okay, because you have a need to make salat within the time and you don't have a means to make the salat otherwise. Like you have Hadeeth and you're not able to make wudu or ghusl, so how are you going to make the salat? Okay, you have a need and no way to do it other than tayammum, and that is the circumstance in which tayammum will be permissible for you. All right, this is why you can't make tayammum until after the prayer time is in, because there's no need for it before the prayer time is in. Okay, before dhuhr time has come in, you don't have an obligation to make a salat, which means you don't have a need to make a salat. And without a necessity being present, then you can't make tayammum. So you must first wait for the prayer time to come in, because it's only at that time that the obligation of the salat will be upon you. Second thing that you must do before you make tayammum. It says unexcused najasa is removed. So if you have najasa on your body, which will not be excused in the salat. Some types of najasa are excused in the salat. Like if you have blood from your own injury, a small amount of it is excused. If you have excused najasa, then don't worry about it. You can make tayammum. But if you have unexcused najasa, it must be removed first before you do tayammum. And again, the reason why is because tayammum is something that's only resorted to out of necessity. Okay, and you don't have a necessity until after the najasa has been removed. Number 3, the next thing that you must do before you can make tayammum, and this one only applies if your reason for making tayammum is that there's a lack of water. Either you don't have any water or you don't have enough water. If that's the case, if that's the reason why you're making tayammum, then you also have to meet this third condition. However, if the reason why you're making tayammum is because you have a sickness and the water will be harmful to you, well, then in that case, you don't need to seek any water. Number 3, it says water has been sought if there's a lack of water. So if the reason why you're making tayammum is lack of water, then you cannot make tayammum until after you have tried to get water. There's a lot to talk about here, so let's just go through what it means to search for water. There are several different cases here. Actually, let me see if I can draw something up on the old computer. This is not going to be easy for me. Okay. Okay. Inshallah, everyone can see this. So there are going to be several cases here. All right. Case number 1. If you know that water is present in a distance of half a farsakh, you must use water. In this case, this is like case number 1 here. If you know, I'm going to put this in a special color. Right. If you know that water is present within a distance of half a farsakh, then you must use water. You're not going to be allowed to make tayammum if you know for sure that water is present. This is why I put no in a different color. When I say you know water is present, I mean you are certain about it. You're 100% certain water is present. There's no chance of the water not being present. Then that's this case. What is a half a farsakh? Okay, let's add a little bit of notes there. Okay, 1 farsakh equals 3 Islamic miles. 1 farsakh is 3 Islamic miles. Okay, 1 Islamic mile is, according to the strongest opinion, 6,000 cubits. 6,000 cubits. Also another opinion that's just 1/3 of that, which would be 2,000 cubits. But the strongest opinion is that 1 Islamic mile is 6,000 cubits. A cubit, I remind you, is a distance from the tip of the middle finger to the elbow, to the bottom of the elbow of an average-sized adult male. Okay, it's roughly 1.5 feet. Some people have said that it's about 47 centimeters. Some people estimate it at 47 centimeters. So if you want to know the kind of distance we're talking about, you can just pull out a calculator and you can say, okay, 1 Islamic mile is 6,000 cubits. So you do 6,000. Okay. Times 47 centimeters, and you get 282,000 centimeters. Then you divide that by 100, and you get 2,820 meters. Divide that by 1,000, you get 2.82 kilometers. Divide that by 1.6, and you get 1.76 normal miles, normal American miles. So 1 Islamic mile is 1.7625 of our American miles. If you multiply that by 3, you get 1 farsakh, 5.2875 miles. That's 1 farsakh. So if you know that water is present within a distance of half of a farsakh, so I'm going to take that 5.2875, divide that by 2, and I'm going to get 2.64 miles. Okay, so I'm just going to put here that it's roughly 2.64 miles. So if you know that water is present within a distance of, just over 2.5 miles, then you're not going to be permitted to do tayammum. You're going to have to use water. Okay, that's case number 1. This is what? Case number 1. All right, what's case number 2? Case number 2 is if you know that water is not present at a distance of half a farsakh. If you know for certain, meaning there's no question of you being wrong, if you know for certain that water is not present anywhere within a distance of half a farsakh, then you may make tayammum without searching. You don't have to search for water if you already know for sure that water is not there. That's just wasting time and effort. Okay, if you know for sure that there's no water within a distance of half a farsakh, then we say that your requirement of seeking water has been met. Okay, you don't have to actually do any seeking when you already know beforehand. The search will be futile. The third case. What's the third case? The third case is when you don't know. Right? You don't know if water is present or not. In this case, what do? You search within shouting distance. Search within shouting distance. Shouting distance is what? It's 150 cubits. Oh, I'm sorry, 300 cubits. Shouting distance is 300 cubits, which equals 300 cubits is roughly, it equals about 450 feet. It equals about 150 yards. So it's slightly bigger than a football field in terms of distance. You search a radius of 150 yards around your campsite. Okay, so you take your campsite where you and your traveling companions have stopped. You search a radius of 150 yards around the campsite. What you're looking for when you're searching is signs of water. So like if you're in the desert and there's nothing growing there, but you see a patch somewhere where there's something growing, there's like a bush growing over there. Okay, that's a sign of water. If the bush is growing, there must be water somewhere. Okay, so you can go check out that place where the bush is to see if there's water there. Or for example, if you see a lot of birds in one place, that's a sign that water might be there. So you go check it out. Okay, you're looking for signs of water within this radius of 150 yards. As for how much walking you need to do, well, that's going to depend on how flat the land is. If the land is perfectly flat, like just perfectly flat, like a sheet of paper, then you might not have to walk at all. You could stand in one place and literally look all around you, because you can see a distance of 150 yards. You can see that far with your own eyes. So you can look all around you and confirm whether there are any signs of water or not within the radius. So in that case, you won't need to do much walking. But if the land that you're in has hills and little depressions and things of that sort, then you may need to walk around a bit, walk around as much as is necessary for you to actually look at the entire 150-yard radius around your campsite. This is what's required. It's not required for you to walk, to literally step your foot on every single square foot of that area. What's required is for you to walk enough that you have looked across the whole area. And if you do not find water, then you may make Tayammum. Okay, so if you do not find water, then you may make Tayammum. Of course, if you do find water, then you use the water and you make wudu or ghusl or whatever you need to do. Okay, this is what we mean when we say you search for water. This is what we're talking about. So it says Tayammum may not be done until after the time has come in, the unexcused najasa has been removed, and water has been sought. Okay, you have to look for the water before you can make Tayammum, assuming these conditions are met. Okay, yes, if you make camp and you look for water and you did not find any water, and then while you're still at the camp, you haven't moved or anything, you're still at the camp and another prayer time comes in, yes, it's true, you do not have to look for water again when the next prayer time comes in, because you've already looked within the 150 yards around your campsite. There's one more thing that you need to do before you can make Tayammum, and that is you need to determine the direction of the Qibla. So you do not make Tayammum until after you have already determined which direction you're going to be praying in. This particular requirement is a requirement that there's disagreement about among the scholars in the Shafi'i school. So if you make Tayammum before you determine the Qibla, then there is an opinion that says your Tayammum is still valid, but you must do the other three things first. You have to wait till the time is in, the unexcused najasa must be removed first, and you must search for water first. Okay, great. Normally I would stop here for questions, but why don't I do that? Does anyone have a question about these requirements that must be done before one makes Tayammum? Okay, well, if there are no questions, let's continue to the next part then. The next thing we want to talk about when it comes to Tayammum is how you actually make a Tayammum. What are the integrals of Tayammum? Okay, there are 5 integrals mentioned here in this book, which are 5 things that you must do in order for your Tayammum to be valid. Okay, the first of these things is you must strike the earth 2 times. Okay, you must strike the earth 2 times. That's integral number 1. Right, when we say that you're striking the earth 2 times, we mean you're literally going to take your hands like this. Don't have your fingers very close together. Have your fingers, comfortably spread out. They don't have to be super spread out, but comfortably spread out. And you're going to slap the ground. Okay, that's 1 strike. And then later on in your Tayammum, you're going to have to slap the ground again. Okay, but your Tayammum will not be valid if you only slap the ground 1 time. You're going to have to strike the ground at least 2 times. You can do more than 2, but there's a minimum of 2 strikes of the ground. The second integral of Tayammum is the intention. And the only acceptable intention in Tayammum is that your intention is the permissibility of Salat. Okay, it will not be valid if your intention is to make tayammum, or if your intention is obligatory tayammum, or something like that. These intentions are not acceptable. The only acceptable intention is that you're doing this for permissibility of salat. Why is that the intention? It's because tayammum does not actually lift hadith. If you have minor hadith on your body and you make wudu, the wudu lifts that hadith off of your body, so it's not there anymore. If you have major hadith on your body, then ghusl will lift the major hadith and the minor hadith from your body. But tayammum does not lift hadith. Okay, so if a person has minor hadith and he makes tayammum, the minor hadith remains there. It remains on his body. And if you recall from the definition of hadith, you know that hadith is, a non-physical thing that comes upon the body and prevents salat from being valid. So if you have minor hadith on your body and tayammum does not lift it, that means the minor hadith is still on your body, which means by definition, your salat will be invalid. Okay? This is part of the blessing of tayammum. Allah gave you a way to still perform a valid salat, even though the minor hadith remains on your body. So tayammum is something we do to make salat permissible despite having hadith. This is the role of tayammum. It makes the salat permissible even though you have hadith on your body. Okay, and that's why this is the only acceptable intention, that you're doing it for permissibility of salat. You can't intend that you're doing this for, to lift hadith, because it doesn't lift hadith. Okay, you can't say you're doing it for tayammum, because tayammum in and of itself is not something that's sought. It's not something that's intended to be done. No, the goal here is for you to be able to make salat. That's the goal, so that's the intention. Okay. It says, this intention must be present at the time of the first strike of the earth, and also at the time he begins to wipe his face. So this is another unique thing about tayammum. In most actions in the deen, the intention needs to be present when you start the act. Like in wudu, the intention must be in your heart when you first start washing your face. In ghusl, the intention must be in your heart when you first start washing your body. But in tayammum, there's two places where the intention must be in your heart. The intention must be there when you strike the earth, and the intention must be there when you first start wiping your face. There's two places where the intention must be made. That's because tayammum is not merely the wiping of the body. Tayammum is also the moving of the dust. So you need to have the intention when you strike, because that's the moving of the dust, and you must have the intention when you wipe your face, because that's the wiping of the tayammum itself. It's very possible for you to just maintain the intention from the first slap until you wipe your face. In that case, you're not making two different intentions. You have one intention and you've held it in your heart the whole time you are moving the dust up to your face. But why do scholars say it needs to be present in two different places? Just because it might be the case that you slap the ground with a good intention, and then you get distracted and you lose the intention because, I don't know, you see an elephant or something coming over the hill. You get distracted, and then you remember, oh, I'm making tayammum for permissibility of salat, and so then you wipe your face. This will still be valid, even though your intention got interrupted between the smack and the wiping of the face. This tayammum will still be good, as long as the intention was present at the time of the slap and was also present at the time you begin wiping the face. If the intention goes away in the interim, then that's not going to be a problem. MashaAllah. Number 3, the third integral. The third thing you must do to have a valid tayammum is you must wipe your whole face. You must wipe your whole face. Inshallah, you remember from the wudu section what the boundaries of the face are. The face is everything from the normal hairline to the bottom of the chin and everything between the ears. That whole entire area must be wiped with the dust that's on your hands. And I must caution everybody, if any of you ever need to make tayammum, just know that dust does not flow. It does not move around the way water does. Okay, when you're making wudu, and if you take water and you put it on your face, you can just pretty much just go straight down, and you don't have to worry much about the little crevices and here and there and all of this, because the water itself flows. The water is going to go everywhere. The water is going to go everywhere in all these crevices, but dust is not like that. When you're making tayammum, you have to consciously make sure you wipe every single place, and you have to make sure you wipe every crack, because the dust won't go there on its own. All right, you have to, with your hand, wipe with the dust everywhere. If a man has a thick beard, then he can just wipe the front of the beard. He doesn't have to get the dust into the inside. Okay. Number 4, the fourth integral of tayammum is that you must wipe your hands up to and including the elbows. So the entire area that you normally wash in wudu needs to be wiped with dust in tayammum. And the fifth and final integral is observing the sequence, which means that you must wipe the face before you wipe the hands. In tayammum, there's no need to wipe your head. There's no need to wipe your feet. Okay, tayammum is not like some kind of wudu with dust instead of water. Okay, you don't have to wash everything. You don't have to wipe in tayammum all of the things that you need to wash or wipe in wudu. Tayammum is just the face and the hands up to and including the elbows. That's it. If you do these 5 things, then your wudu will be valid, inshaAllah ta'ala. Also, I'd be remiss if I don't show you the recommended way of performing a tayammum. Okay? I'm going to tell you now that there's a certain starting position. If you can remember the starting position, then inshallah you'll be fine whenever you need to make tayammum. I'm putting it this way because unlike wudu and ghusl, which we do all the time, tayammum is something that many of us don't do frequently. Some of us maybe will not do it at all. Like we'll die without ever having done tayammum. Some of us might make tayammum from time to time, but it could be years in between one time when you need to make tayammum and the next. It's easy to forget these lessons because you don't actually use them much. That's why I'm saying if you can at least remember the starting position, then inshallah, the method I'm about to show you will come back to you. The starting position is like this. You hold, the starting position for the hands is like this. You hold your hand up. Notice my thumb is not sticking out. My thumb is in. Okay. And then you take your other hand, and I'm just going to put this hand on top of the fingers like that. Okay. If you look carefully, you'll notice that the tips of my fingers are sticking out. The tips here, they're sticking out. They're not actually touching these fingers on this hand. The fingertips are sticking out. You'll also notice that the palm of this hand here is not touching anything. So my thumb here, my palm here, and my tips here are not touching anything. So what's the part that's touching the back of these fingers? It's the body of the fingers, but not the tips. I'm going to start like this. Okay? And then I'm just going to start wiping down until I get to my wrist. When I get to my wrist, I'm going to take those fingertips, which up until now haven't touched anything, and I'm going to close them on the side of my arm. So that now, as I keep wiping down, the main body of my fingers are wiping one side of my hand, of my arm, and the fingertips are wiping the side part of my arm. Then once I get down past the elbow, I'm going to roll my arm over so that now the palm of my hand, which up until now hasn't touched anything, is up against my forearm. And then I'm just gonna, let me see. Then I'm just gonna, I'm gonna go like this, and then I'm gonna roll my arm over. And notice I'm keeping my thumb away from my arm. My thumb is not touching. It's just my palm that's touching. And I'm gonna push my palm forwards like this. And with my palm, I'm now gonna touch everything of my forearm that wasn't touched when I brought my hand down. And then when I get to my wrist, Now I'm going to take my thumb, which still hasn't touched anything yet. I'm going to put it down like this on my wrist. I'm going to put it down like this so that when I finish, my thumb will wipe the part of the back of my hand that hasn't been wiped yet. Because if you recall, I started off with my thumb inside, not sticking out. So there's like a part of the back of my hand here and my thumb, which hasn't been wiped yet. I'm going to wipe that at the end by putting my thumb down and going like this. It's a very easy maneuver. If you want to make tayammum, you just go and you did one arm. Then you just do the other arm. Okay, it's very simple to do your hands, your face. I already talked about how you wipe everything. So if you were going to do a sample tayammum, what would you do? You would find some suitable soil. You'd have the intention in your heart. You'd keep your hands with the fingers spread out a bit, and you'll slap the ground. When you slap the ground, it's going to kick up dust. Okay? So your hand and the places between your fingers have already gotten dust on them from the slap. This is why your fingers should not be close together like this. They should be spread out a bit. So when you slap, the dust gets between the fingers. Okay? And you slap that ground one time with the intention. Then, as you get your hands up to your head, you make sure the intention is still in your heart and you wipe. Making sure that you get all of the places, all of the crevices, all the everything, including your lips. Remember, when you like keep your lips in a relaxed position and your mouth closed, like this, everything that's showing of your lips is something that needs to be wiped. So you're going to wipe also the lips, facial hair, as I said. You can just wipe the front of it rather than making the dust reach the inside. That's what you're going to do after the first strike of the earth. Then you're going to strike the earth for the second time. Again, kicking dust up on your hands. Now, it's important that if you have a ring on one of your fingers, that you take that ring off before the second strike. Because the second strike, now that your face has been wiped, now the dust is going to be for the purposes of the hand. So you have to make sure the dust reaches everywhere it needs to reach. So rings need to be removed before the second strike. You're going to strike the second time, and then you're going to do the process we talked about. And then your tayammum is finished. I'll pause now and take some more questions about the process of tayammum. It says, if you are in a life or death situation and you have just enough time to just pray with the intention of seeking Allah's help, do all these rules count? Will your prayers be valid? I don't actually understand the situation. I need something more specific than this. So I can't answer without understanding in more detail the specific circumstance that you need to ask about. Are there any other questions about how a person performs tayammum? Okay. Well, then let's continue in the chapter. It says, one may pray only a single obligatory salat with each tayammum. Okay, so every time you make tayammum, you may pray a maximum of one obligatory salat with that tayammum. You can pray as many sunnah salats as you want. You can pray as many optional salats as you want. Okay, but you can only do one obligatory salat with it. So yes, that means that if you're traveling and you intend to combine Dhuhr and Asr together, then it means that you're going to have to wait for Dhuhr time to come in. Let's just talk about the case where you're going to combine prayers and you're going to pray Asr in Dhuhr time. Then you wait for Dhuhr time to come in. Okay? You remove your unexcused najasa. You look for water. You determine the Qibla. Then you make your tayammum with the intention of permissibility of salat, and you pray Dhuhr. And according to the rules of combining salats, you're going to need to have the intention while you're praying Dhuhr that you're bringing Asr forward into Dhuhr time. You're going to also have to make sure that you do not have a long delay between Dhuhr and Asr. Okay, but in that gap between Dhuhr and Asr, you're going to have to make another Tayammum. Because one Tayammum is only good for one obligatory Salat. Dhuhr is obligatory, Asr is also obligatory, so it will require a second Tayammum. No, you will not have to wait until Asr time to make the second Tayammum, because your intention, which you made while you were praying Dhuhr, that intention to bring Asr forward into Dhuhr time, that is sufficient to now make Dhuhr time, make it as if Dhuhr is now also a time for Asr. So because of that intention, we say that Asr time has come in. And you can make a Tayammum immediately after you finish the Dhuhr. You're still in the same place, so you don't need to search again. You make a Tayammum immediately after Dhuhr, and then you pray Asr with a different Tayammum than the one you used for Dhuhr. Last thing we need to talk about before we finish the Tayammum section is what invalidates Tayammum. Okay. What are the things that will break your Tayammum, to put it in normal speech, but what are the things that invalidate it, so that even though you made Tayammum, now you are not permitted to make Salat? Now I'll say that again. You make Tayammum for the intention of what? Permissibility of Salat. So if you do any of these three things that we're about to mention, then Salat will not be permissible for you. That's what we mean when we say it invalidates the Tayammum. It means your permissibility of making Salat is over. What are these three things? It says Hadeeth. So one of the things that invalidates your Tayammum is any kind of Hadeeth, minor Hadeeth or major Hadeeth. Okay, so if you do any of the four things that cause minor Hadeeth, your Tayammum is now invalid. If you do any of the things that, any of the five things that cause major Hadeeth, your Tayammum is invalid. The second thing that invalidates Tayammum is seeing water, if not in Salat. So if a person is not in the middle of Salat and he sees water, okay, if you see water while you're not in Salat, then your Tayammum is invalidated. And when I say see water, I'm just sort of borrowing the expression that the fuqaha, the scholars of fiqh, use. But we don't literally mean see water. What we mean when we say you see water is you see a possibility of water. Like you have a reason to believe water might actually be available. Even if it turns out water is not available, the fact that you now have cause to believe water might be available, that is enough to break the Tayammum, assuming you're not in Salat when this realization comes to you. So for example, let's say that you make Tayammum. You're not in Salat. You made Tayammum. You're going to wait for some other people to do their Tayammum so that you can pray in Jama'ah. And someone says, hey, I found water. There's a lake right over there. Then all of your Tayammums are invalid because you now believe water is present. I'll give you another example. Let's say you make Tayammum and then a mirage appears. It looks like there's a lake over there, but there isn't really a lake over there. But it looks like there's a lake over there. Your Tayammum is invalid. Your Tayammum becomes invalid because of the mirage. You momentarily thought that there might possibly be water. And even though you knew a moment later that it's not real, that moment where there was a possibility of water was already enough to invalidate the Tayammum. I'll give you another example. Let's say you make Tayammum. Nobody found water anywhere. Everybody searched. There's no water. Okay? But then you hear somebody say, I have water for drinking. You hear somebody say, I have water for drinking. Your Tayammum is now invalidated. Okay. Even though this person's water is only for drinking. This person's water is only for drinking. Okay, we're talking about someone who has just enough water to satisfy his needs for thirst. He doesn't have extra water for wudu or ghusl. Didn't we say at the beginning of the chapter that that counts as being unable to use water? Yes, that means you're not able to use water. Yes, that means you can make tayammum. So why does this break the tayammum? Why does this invalidate tayammum then? If someone says, I have water for drinking, it's because of the order of the words in the sentence. The man cried out loud, I have water. At that moment, when he said, I have water, at that moment, there is now in your mind, in your heart, there's now a possibility that water might be available. So your tayammum is at that moment invalidated. And then when he says the rest of his sentence, for drinking, that's not going to somehow make your tayammum come back. Your tayammum was invalidated once he said, I have water. Now, if he had said that sentence in a different order, if he had said, I have drinking water, then your tayammum would not have been invalidated. But if he says the words, I have water for drinking, that will invalidate your tayammum because there is a momentary possibility of water. That's what it means when it says here, seeing water. That seeing water invalidates your tayammum. What it means is, if you have any reason to believe, even if it's just for a moment, that water might be available, like if there's any possibility of water, then your tayammum is invalidated and you will have to go check out that possibility. And you will not be able to make another tayammum until you have sought water and confirmed that water is not available. And what's the third and final thing that invalidates tayammum? It's apostasy. Remember, tayammum is a special favor from Allah, which Allah gives to the believers so that we can perform what? Salat. Okay, so if a person is an apostate, meaning if a person was a Muslim and then he left Islam, he became a kafir. All right, if he made tayammum when he was a Muslim and then he left Islam, leaving Islam invalidates his tayammum. Leaving Islam invalidates his tayammum because he has no permissibility of making salat while he's in that state. So his permissibility of making salat ended when he left Islam. And if he says the shahadas and comes back to Islam, his permissibility of making salat will not return on its own. He's going to have to make a new tayammum. Okay, if you notice, tayammum is different than wudu and ghusl. Okay, wudu, if a Muslim makes wudu, and then he becomes a kafir, and then he says the shahadas to come back to Islam, his wudu is still good. His wudu will still be good. Because the wudu, the valid wudu that he made when he was a Muslim, it removed minor hadith from his body. And leaving Islam is not one of the four causes of minor hadith. So when he left Islam, that didn't cause hadith to come onto his body. And so when he said the shahadas and came back to Islam, his body is still clear of minor hadith. This person could make a salat right away. Similarly, al-ghusl. You know, if a person made ghusl and left major hadith from his body, then he became a kafir, then he came back to Islam, his ghusl is still good. He still doesn't have minor hadith. He still doesn't have major hadith on his body. But tayammum is different. Tayammum is a weaker type of purification. It's weaker because it doesn't actually lift hadith. So if you make tayammum, it didn't lift hadith from your body. It only made it permissible for you to make salat. And by leaving Islam, that permissibility is interrupted. So the tayammum you made no longer has a benefit. And if you come back to Islam, you will have to make a new tayammum in order to regain the benefit of being able to make salat with hadith. Okay, we'll stop here now that we completed the section on tayammum. If there are any questions about any part of the lesson today, inshallah, I'll take them now. Is the second strike in a different spot? Ideally, yes. But if you're in a situation where the soil, there's only one place for you to strike, well then, as long as none of the dust that was already on your hand comes off of your hand, then that dust is not considered to be used yet. It's not used dust until it falls off from your body. What's next? Someone asked, can I wash my feet in a separate area? So tayammum is used when water is not available. So, I mean, if you have water to be washing your feet, then you need to be using that water on your face and your hands, which is more important than your feet. But I guess, I mean, there may be some situations, like say, wudu isn't what you need. You need to make a ghusl. And say you have an injury on your thigh that you can't let that injury get wet. So yeah, you can use water everywhere else except the part of your thigh that's injured, including washing your feet with water. And you're going to have to make a tayammum because there's a part of your body you didn't wash in the ghusl, that part of your thigh. You will have to make a tayammum. And so, yes, you can make the ghusl in one place, and in that place, the water will get wet and will not be dusty. But then there'll be some other place where the ground is still dusty, and you can go to that place to make your tayammum. Yes, you can do that. What if it's been raining and you can't find any dry dirt? Again, tayammum is something we do due to lack of water. Okay, if the rain was so recent that the ground has no dust to it, and the ground is not dry, then that's reason to believe water is available. Okay, there's probably water that can be found in that situation. Are there any more questions? Okay. Well, in that case, let's say La ilaha illallah before we close out. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. بارك الله فيكم. I will see you inshallah same time next week. May Allah bless you all and grant you success. Ameen.